Yeah, we do.
Hi.
Yeah, we do.
Hi.
Here he is.
Hello. I'm
Super
guest.
excited to have Todd Nienkerk with us today, CEO of Four Kitchens. Going to read a little intro for Todd, and then we're going to dive into some of his crazy growth story over the last 12 to 18 months today. So let me shake this loose, and then Todd, you can kind of course correct me if I go off the rails a little bit. But so Todd is responsible for driving Four Kitchens' vision and long-term strategy as head chef. Very on brand. His recipes include fostering an environment that drives creativity, innovation, and collaboration. Todd has been part of the web design and publishing community since 1996. Don't add that up. Designing and developing countless websites, as well as writing, editing, and managing several online and print publications. He has degrees in psychology and mass media, and that those propelled his passion for understanding how humans perceive and experience the world around them through technology and emerging forms of communication. As an active member of the web and open source communities, Todd has spoken at more than 60 conferences around the world. As a former comedy writer, humor runs deep in his veins, an underrated value he seeks to instill in the Four Kitchens ethos. He's also an avid traveler, a collector of rare Lego sets, a sci-fi lover, and an amateur race car driver. Welcome, Todd, to the
Hi.
program. As I
That
mentioned,
well
was that
well
good?
crafted bio from our website finally came in handy.
It was
Thank you.
all without ChatGPT too. It was pretty
That's
amazing.
right.
Like I said, Todd runs Four Kitchens. Four Kitchens, through their content expertise and technical excellence, has a long history of helping teams who educate, advocate, and inform realize their website's potential and make a positive change in the world. And again, just so much thanks to having you join us today. Um, Todd and I speak regularly, and just having these conversations with you over the last 12 to 18 months, listening to your story and the tremendous sort of roller coaster ride that it's been, and how you've operationalized it to really optimize the experience for your team and for your clients as you've gone through all that. um, really excited to hear that today, really excited for the audience to hear that today. So I guess maybe let's start a little bit at the beginning, which is maybe take us back a little bit to and if you want to, by the way, alter or add anything to Four Kitchens bio, please do. But
No, you nailed it, which is I guess mostly a compliment for our website copy again. So
there you
thank you.
go, boom, there it
Yeah.
is. It took very few clicks, so congratulations.
Well, thank you.
So yeah, so about 12 to 18 months ago, you guys went through a pretty significant transformation that involved a combination of M&A, some offshoring opportunities, led to some hyper growth. And coming out of that hyper growth, there's been optimization and efficiencies that have had to been incorporated from an operational standpoint. Can you talk to us a little bit about what that journey's been like?
Absolutely, yeah. It actually goes back just a little bit further than that. So just over 2 years ago, we merged with another agency that has been around the Drupal and open source space for a long time called Advomatic. And that was something that was just a great opportunity that landed in our lap, really. I had never up to that point ever seriously considered, even like in sort of a fantastical way, the idea of merging with or acquiring another agency. It's something that I was really interested in doing, but it just felt so complicated and almost impossible at times. And it just wasn't something that we were like deliberately seeking at that point. But the owner of Advomatic at the time, Sarah Durham, she was looking to retire, and she owned both the development agency Advomatic and a marketing agency called Big Duck, and she was looking to sell those in different ways. And so when she went about selling Advomatic, she reached out to me and some other people, and we had some conversations. We put in a bid, and we won that bid, and we took over, merged with Advomatic and took over their client portfolio and hired their team and began to incorporate their processes almost exactly 2 years ago. So it was July of 2020, sorry, 2021.
From a percentage standpoint, in terms of so we can get some context from a percentage
Sure.
standpoint around headcount, so you don't get to give us specific numbers, but from a headcount and revenue standpoint, once the merger was complete, what had you adopted in terms of growth?
Oh, let's see. In terms of headcount, the increase wasn't dramatic. We were at the time about a 30-person agency, and we added 5 people with this merger with Advomatic. The dramatic change was the increase in size and nature of the portfolio, the client portfolio
Mhm.
that we were bringing on board. We doubled the number of active client relationships. Advomatic was working quite a bit with something called continuous care, which is something that we've adopted as well. It's a subscription based support and ongoing strategy engagement. And so they were working in higher volume than
Mhm.
we had previously worked at Four Kitchens, and they were also working with quite a few more nonprofit and advocacy clients. Four Kitchens had always worked with some, but not, it was usually maybe the third or fourth or fifth largest vertical that we were working in, and this just instantly made it, the largest or second largest type of client that we were engaged with. So that was really a much more dramatic shift. We saw an increase in average bill rate and lots of other metrics.
So
So it
basically, they
increased.
were sorry to interrupt, but so basically, they were with a team 1/6 of your size, were basically managing the same number of clients, not maybe not the same revenue, but the same number of clients.
Same number of
Interesting.
clients, not the same amount of revenue, to be sure. They also they had a slightly different model than us. They relied more on contractors and partners and third parties that they'd reach out to
Hmm.
bring into the projects and execute the work or handle certain phases of the work or whatever. And so we also benefited from bringing those relationships into Four Kitchens as
Got
well.
it.
So about a year went by, and so this was, early mid 2022, and this was we're going to have to sort of put on our time machine helmets here because this was the time when, as we were coming out of the pandemic, and suddenly these big tech companies, the Facebooks and the Apples and the Googles and the everybody, were really poaching from agencies and offering just absurd compensation and benefits packages to entice them away from agencies. And the job market just became super, super competitive very, very quickly. And that was a major issue that a lot of us in the agency space were dealing with in early 2022. It was a conversation I had with you, Jason, actually,
Yep.
that got me thinking very seriously about building a team outside of the U.S. and Canada. And I believe you had said something along the lines of how throughout the pandemic you had not your turnover had either been zero or had been very, very low.
Hmm.
And that's, well, remarkable for a number of reasons. But you explained that a lot of that had to do with having a team in, I believe, Romania and Eastern Europe and maybe some other places. So correct
Hmm.
me if I'm wrong there. Um, but you had an interesting take on it that I hadn't quite seen it through the lens that you were using, and that was obviously hiring in other countries can be beneficial because it can increase your margin and it there are a number of reasons why people traditionally do that, right?
Hmm.
And those are compelling. But the thing that you had mentioned that I hadn't really realized before was when you build that margin, you are then able to offer better compensation and benefits, not only to that team located outside the US and Canada, but also your team inside the US and Canada, that it's a rising tide raises all boats kind of approach, and that leads to retention. And since retention was the number one thing in my mind at the time, I thought, well, this could be a long-term trend. Certainly salaries don't come back down.
That's
They
right.
go up, but they never
Yeah.
really ratchet back, right? So this is at least a permanent change to where we had landed, and it was probably going to get worse. And so at that point, I think almost immediately after you and I had talked, I reached out to some friends of mine who ran an agency in Costa Rica called Manatee. We had talked with them years and years prior about what would it be like if we somehow combined our teams or worked together very closely. And
Mhm.
This was before I had had any experience with M&A, before this was anything I really had any vocabulary around or understanding about. And honestly, I went about it in just the wrong way. I had the wrong idea about how it would work and how we would all benefit. But having gone through the merger with Advomatic a year prior at this point, and knowing what the outcome was intended to be, which was retention, raising margin primarily to drive retention and to slow the hamster wheel treadmill of clients want to pay less and downward pressure on rate, but people want to be paid more, and so you're always ratcheting that up. And we started to have that conversation in a much more serious and experienced way.
Mhm.
And within a few months, we had gathered in Austin in person, and we were working out the high level details of the plan. And so that was almost exactly a year ago that we were having really serious conversations and starting to enter due diligence into that second acquisition.
And that was really where, well, I guess I'll say two things. One is, yeah, I remember that conversation very clearly because, yes, I think, look, cash is probably the biggest arrow you can have in your quiver, right? In terms
Yep.
of, and I'm not saying, I'm not saying that just because you pay people more, they're definitely going to stay. Because I don't know if that's necessarily true, but it certainly doesn't hurt, especially when the labor market that you're dealing with is the gap is so big that you have to
Hmm.
at least close the gap in some kind of way, right? So cash certainly helps with that. The other thing we talked about there was just maybe the ability to market the fact that and I know a lot of owners don't like this idea necessarily because they think it somehow dilutes their brand, and I disagree. But to market the idea that maybe you are a stepping stone to the big five tech companies, and there's nothing wrong with that. You can attract a lot of
Sure.
talent,
Yeah.
through that kind of articulation. So
Hmm.
you can kind of twist that problem maybe and kind of turn it into an advantage from a marketing standpoint. But so after, well, the other thing we talked about was after you went through the the acquisition of Manatee was just that was really where your headcount exploded, right? I mean, that's where
Yes, it
you really
was. Yeah.
jumped.
At that point, we went from we had grown a little bit on top of the merger with Advomatic, and we were at, I want to say, maybe 40, 45 people at the time. And we added another 20, 25 at that point. And so seeing that 50% growth overnight, um, was and also with
And
with
your
the team
COO is on
international.
maternity leave at the time.
Yes, our COO. So to clarify that, our COO was in fact on maternity leave. She was out for several months, but I did let her know that this was something that as soon as I had this idea, she was actually the first person I called after seeing if there was interest from Manatee. And so I let her know this is something that I was interested in doing, and how would she want to proceed? Like, is she okay with taking a back seat to this while she's out, or does she really want us to wait? Or so we did check in with her, and she said, no, let's all get together, in the summer. We'll do this like 2-day retreat with the Manatee leadership team, see if there is in fact a good fit, and if there is,
Mhm.
great. Um, and we wound up handling a lot of the groundwork for that prior to her returning. And the details were finalized, and the deal was closed shortly after she came back. And she has been leading, along with several other people, the integration efforts of those teams ever since. Um, but yes, it certainly, if you just glance at a calendar, you think, wait, the COO was on maternity leave when all of this happened. It's like,
Surprise.
the COO leaves, and suddenly the CEO is just like, I want to do all this stuff,
That's
right?
right.
No, we were certainly more mindful than that, but I can see how it would look that way from the outside.
um, so, Bart, we can't hear you, buddy. We want to hear you because your points are salient and extremely intelligent. Um,
Are are
there you
they?
go.
Yes, hello.
Here he comes. Here he comes.
Oh, I was just saying it's like the guardrails or the mom and dad are gone. We can just do whatever we want.
That's
Yep.
right.
Yep.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Party.
Um,
Cool.
but where you mentioned a roller coaster earlier, so that's kind of it's not actually
It's
clear to
not
me.
the
It's sort of like
it's the slow part as you're
it's
going
the
up.
slow
It's the
part. It's
very
okay.
beginning of the roller
It's the
coaster where
beginning,
you're like, "Oh, this is going to be so much fun."
right? It's kind of like that
Tick,
saying,
tick,
like,
tick,
"Oh,
tick,
it's
tick.
all downhill from here." Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Like sometimes that means good. It's so like roller
Yeah.
coaster. Like, are we now? What anyway, point is that was certainly that's a lot of excitement and growth and upswing and new clients and new verticals and new possibilities and all of these fantastic things and all these doors open.
Mhm.
Well, the timing of that turned out to be kind of challenging because we closed that deal, the acquisition of Manatee, and expanded internationally into Costa Rica on October 1st, 2022.
Mhm.
And it was around that time that the economy started to slow. So throughout 2022, we had, up to that point, we had been dealing with a very competitive labor market, explosion of salaries and compensation, and also really some unprecedented demand from our clients. We could not staff projects quickly enough. We were having to turn away and delay work because we just simply didn't have bandwidth. We were we weren't even responding to a lot of inquiries, and I mean we were politely, but having to say no for many months because we just didn't have bandwidth. And so
This
here
was
we
this
were,
was this was web development.
web development, design, some
Okay.
content strategy, UX,
So across the board, really,
across
you're
the
saying.
board. It
Okay.
was everything was really swamped in 2022. And so we were like, all right, we got this great team. We're ready to go. We're going to make sure that that team in Costa Rica is freed up to do this work. And then October 1 is when things started to kind of slow down and
Right.
that demand started to drop. Also, the labor market became less competitive, which is a good thing for employers who don't have stock market money and VC money and all of that. But at that point, we realized like, okay, we have a really big team. We have a team that is just larger than the work that we can support. So we went into maintenance and wait and see mode for a few quarters. And while we never really lost money, we were concerned about cash flow, well, I should say cash reserves, because we had spent a lot on setting up this business in Costa Rica and acquiring Manatee and
Mhm.
the previous merger. We were still financially working with that, and so we saw a dip in our cash reserves. And looking ahead to the remainder of 2023 and seeing a lot of uncertainty and a pattern of good, solid clients who were delaying projects because internally they were freezing budgets or delaying spending or whatever they were doing internally. We had to make the difficult decision to downsize our team because we just couldn't continue to bet on things turning around relatively quickly. So, uh, just last month, we had to downsize our team by about 10% or about 6 people. Obviously, very sad and very difficult for everybody. Uh, but where that has landed us now is we see a clear trajectory to building up our cash reserves to the point where we want them to be while still remaining profitable and still having a really solid team to finish out this year, which is probably just going to be whatever it's going to be.
Mhm.
Uh, but looking ahead to 2024 and still having a really good mix of skills and services and enough capacity to take on a lot of big work that we are expecting without having uh, made the team too small. And then
Right. The
we
pendulum
all know that
swings.
the
Right.
swing can hurt in the other
Right.
direction. So that's where
Um.
we're at. That's the roller coaster of a lot of growth and excitement and possibility. And here we are, ready to go. We've got this big, great, amazing team, and then the work that was there 2 months ago is just not really there anymore,
Yeah.
and everybody is freaking out about the economy.
Yeah. I think. Let's start with the downsizing part. So, Was it how did you come to the decision on the 10% that you decided to cut? What did you look at, like, internal data that the company was sort of spitting out and say, hey, you know what, the cut we need to make is sort of concentrated in this one department, or maybe against this one kind of vertical, or against this one service that is just not keeping up with the rest of the company? Or was it sort of a more broad approach that it was really just around, like, hey, we have to, I'm sorry, but we have to shed some maybe larger salaries if we're really going to make an impact with a 10% cut? The 10% cut has to be a real 10% cut. Can't just be six people. It also has to translate to real cost savings of six people. So again, I'm assuming if, like, four of the six people were in Costa Rica and only two were in America, you're still cutting six people, but not as much cost as if you inverted those ratios, right? So
Yeah.
how did you sort of think about the intentionality of the downsizing?
Uh, that's a lot goes into a decision like that. There are so many things to consider. Um, the our our guiding principles in approaching this downsizing was thinking about what kind of team do we need in 2024, and what kind of revenue can we reliably achieve in 2024. So we did a lot of financial analysis around what we felt was a fairly conservative revenue estimate. We knew that we would have to eliminate some roles in order to lower our capacity to that revenue, because originally we were at more than 10 million in potential revenue,
Hmm.
and the number that we landed at, just to be completely candid, was 9.5 million, that we would have to reduce our team size to be able to hit that number. So that was the number one thing that we were trying to do, because this was not an emergency, we're losing cash, we're not profitable, we're in a nosedive. It wasn't
Right.
that
That's not
kind
an
of situation.
existential crisis, right?
It wasn't an existential crisis. It was um, if something else were to happen, we might be in that position. If the economy were to get worse, we might find ourselves there in 3 to 6 months.
Right.
So what we need to do is reserve cash, be smart, wait this out, and continue to do all the things that we're doing, providing great service, doing great content marketing, all of that, and wait for the cycle to come back around again. So the number one thing to do there was reducing our team size to match the amount of revenue that we could really count on earning.
Got it.
So then within that, the decisions we had to make within that framework led us to a fairly broad and even-handed approach in the roles that we had to select. So it was proportional. It was largely proportional according to existing team sizes
Hmm.
and location. Uh, U.S., Canada, and Costa Rica. So all of that was really proportional. The one services area that we did not really touch was the creative team. And the main reason for that was we are leaning so heavily into content marketing to
Right.
build a demand channel for that team specifically, that if we found ourselves short a person on the creative team, we would not be able to then meet that content marketing demand that we hope to generate. And if we found ourselves in a position where, when the floodgates reopen and we have two or three anchor projects or capital projects that come along that need discovery, design, all of that at roughly the same time, we would not be able to take on that work. And
Right.
as a result, dozens of people on the build side would suffer
Hmm.
for that. So we did not eliminate any roles from the creative team for that reason. But other than that, everything else was pretty evenly distributed in every imaginable way.
That makes a lot of sense. You said something that was interesting there about sort of waiting for the cycle to sort of complete its rotation.
Hmm.
Services is cyclical. Figuring out a consistency to the cyclicality is the trick, I think. But we know it's going to be up and down, right?
Yep.
I guess the only consistent thing is that it's inconsistent. But while you were waiting for, or while you've been, I guess, and we're talking about probably the last 3 quarters, I would imagine, right, since
Hmm.
sort of
Yep.
the end of last year. Um, What kind of business development challenges have you had due to the fact that through your growth, you took on maybe some new services or new offerings that Four Kitchens didn't have before? Did sort of the existing Four Kitchens business development team have to sort of learn how to sell and market new services and so on and so forth, or did the acquisitions come with a certain amount of sales and marketing infrastructure that you were able to integrate? How did that work? Because I know for a lot of companies or a lot of agencies when they go through M&A, and they broaden their verticals or they broaden their service offerings, one of the challenges that they tend to have is they know how to sell what they the parent company or the acquiring company knows how to sell what they do. Now they're bringing in new things and they have less
Yep.
expertise around that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, each of these, the merger with Advomatic and the acquisition of Manatee were very, very different. They had different goals. They had different, scales. There were different things that we wanted to get out of each of those. So very, very different kinds of things. With Advomatic, which happened in 2021, the owner was retiring, and the sales channel that had been developed over the years that she owned Advomatic was really driven entirely by her and
Mhm.
a lot of word of mouth. So she was sort of the main salesperson. Um, e- Everybody on the team, of course, contributed to that effort, helped with estimation and creating, roadmaps and strategies and all that. So I don't mean to diminish any of that work at all. But in terms of like really connecting the dots and closing sales and things like that, it was largely Sarah doing that work. Um, so we were very, very deliberate in that process to make sure that the handoff of those relationships to our biz dev team, which at the time I was largely leading or kind of on my way out the door from having led for a while,
Mhm.
that handoff was really as good as it could possibly be. It wasn't perfect. We did drop a couple of balls here and there. It's hard not to when you're
Sure.
working on 30 to 35 incoming relationships all at once. Um, Not an excuse, but it's just the reality of the situation. But that worked out really well. So there was a lot of intentionality in maintaining those relationships, and we also had an arrangement with Sarah to continue to help us for a period after close. So she would, if we needed to call on her or get her advice or whatever, she was available, and that's very standard in any kind
Mhm.
of transaction like that.
Sure. It's in
With
her interest too, right?
Yes, yes, and with Manatee, we were really mostly interested in the team. Uh,
Mm.
the clients that Manatee was working with were a mixture of local Costa Rican clients and entities and agencies located in the US and Canada that were subcontracting work to them. And so, unsurprisingly, that part of the business, the other agencies that were subcontracting to them, were a lot less interested very quickly overnight in subcontracting to Four Kitchens,
Sure.
somebody that they see as, possibly competition.
Mhm.
And so we knew that those relationships were probably going to wind down pretty quickly. And then with the local clients within Costa Rica, we made a deliberate and strategic decision to offboard those clients over the course of about 12 to 15 months. And so we're towards the end of that
Going
time
through that
frame
now. Mhm.
around now. And that's really because the budgets are just very different in Costa Rica,
Mm.
and that from a margin standpoint and from a revenue standpoint, it's just a lot better to free those people up to work on clients located in the US and Canada.
100%.
So from a biz dev perspective, the main challenges were, one, maintaining really solid relationships with existing clients that we wanted to keep. Two, incorporating Advomatic's product, their support product called Continuous Care. That did take quite a long time. That took about a full year to cycle old Four Kitchens clients. I shouldn't say old clients at
Legacy.
Four Kitchens who were using our old support plan
Mhm.
and moving them on to the Advomatic support model because we preferred it.
Right.
That was one of the reasons why Advomatic was so attractive to us to merge into Four Kitchens. Um, so that process took quite a while, and that had to be very deliberate. So from a biz dev perspective, lots of, explaining the value of that and kind of changing people's expectations around how support is going to work moving forward and all of that. But there weren't many like altogether new service lines that were being offered. It's not as if we were a development agency and we were merging with a company that had a creative team and we had never worked with creative directly in house
Right.
before. So
Right.
there wasn't anything as drastic or as significant a change as that. So from a biz dev perspective, certainly lots of work was required, but there wasn't really like a, oh boy, we have a whole new set of things that we need to sell into. How do we do it? That's not something that we encountered.
Got it. Got it. Awesome. Thank you. I have one thing left, and we can, and I'll throw it back to Bart to finish up. But I guess so. You've taken us through this basically right up until today. And today we're recording. It's August. What is it? The second,
The
third,
second.
second. Well, so it's August 2nd. But we're recording. It's beginning of August, and like again, great last 18 months to bring us up to this point. So what are you talked a lot about 2024 and gearing up and really this M&A strategy, um, the growth, the downsizing, the consolidation, the efficiencies, the optimizations, the integrations really is all, kind of headed towards your 2024 goals. As you sort of sit here on August 2nd, how are you looking at the rest of the year integration is tough. Like operational integration is tough. The fact that you were able to do it in about a year twice is really impressive. And shout out to your ops team there for sure. But what do you see sort of in the immediate and maybe a little bit longer term future, and how do you feel those integrations are going against that future?
To answer that, I'll back up just a half step. I think it would be easy to hear this story, this sort of roller coaster story of grow, 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 downsize, and see a cause and effect there that is actually a lot more nuanced and a lot more complex than it appears to be. Because you could very easily draw the conclusion of we got a little too ambitious, we grew too quickly, didn't have the pipeline to meet it, had to downsize.
Mhm.
Well, there is an element of truth to that,
But not in
but
a net way.
not in a net way. That's right. Absolutely not in a net way. And I think that's what some people might overlook.
Yeah.
Uh, what this kind of growth, this specific type of growth, and the degree of growth has given us is a much broader client portfolio that is actually overall more focused on the kinds of work that we want to do.
Mm.
So it's allowing us actually, yes, we took on a lot more clients, but we're now able to specialize a lot more. Um, we because of the way the economics work when you're building a team in another country, your cash and your runway is a lot longer
Mm.
because it's just less expensive. So we were actually able to wait longer and to try to see the market turn around over, maybe 3 quarters as opposed to 1 or 2, because we had this team in Costa Rica. We would have had to act a lot faster. That downward slope of potential cash loss would be a lot sharper
Mhm.
than if we had a team entirely in the U.S. and Canada. So it actually put the brakes on a lot of things, and that's something that is worth highlighting because you could very easily say they got too big, and then their eyes are bigger than their stomach, and that's it. It's really not that simple.
Right. There's an
Um,
organic, I think they call it swallowing the fish in growth, right? Where
mm,
that there's this period of time that you're going to see retraction, right, or reduction.
yeah,
But the point is that you're taking 5 steps forward and maybe 1 or 2 steps back, which still again nets you out 3 steps ahead of where you were, which is the point,
exactly.
right? And then
That's
eventually
exactly the
you
point.
optimize on the 3 steps and you get back to that 5 steps ahead where you immediately jump to, right? But in order to
Yes.
maintain that kind of growth, yeah, that makes sense. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you
Yep.
off, but that
No, no,
that
not at all.
that's
That's I love that metaphor, and that actually that puts it a lot more concisely and clearly than I was trying to how I was trying to explain it. Um, so we're looking ahead to 2024, and what does growth? What will the results of this growth be? Um, what I want to see happen is I want to see us regain some of that growth that we lost this year. And I want to really focus on our creative team and in particular our content strategy offering because I feel like there's a lot of growth there. I feel like there's a lot of opportunity for some service, some services related to AI that are specific to the needs and wants of our clients,
Hmm.
and not AI in the sense of like we're going to have AI write all your content for you.
Yeah.
That's actually not going to happen,
Right.
at least not anytime in the near future, as people fear. But what is going to happen is working with our clients to create an AI strategy wherein their content, their information, their expertise, whatever it is that they use their website for, needs to be consumable and interactable with some kind of AI entity.
Hmm.
So that might be like a virtual assistant chatbot that is essentially a search tool. It's just a very, very sophisticated search tool that can read a corpus of knowledge and content and provide direct answers rather than somebody having to search
Right.
for them. So that's an area that I see us expanding into pretty quickly, starting early next year. So I want to see us uh, grow the creative team, expand into offering some AI related services, regain some of the growth that we lost this year. And I'd really like to see us break 10 million next year. I think it's possible. We're not going to build a financial plan to that, but that would be a stretch goal. And that would be I mean, that's kind of a big that's a psychologically important number,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
And I I want to see some really solid fundamental financial success that is sustainable over multiple years because I'm also at the point in my journey where if for no other reason than practicality I need to be thinking about what a succession plan looks like,
Sure.
meaning even if I don't I don't want to go, if I what if something were to happen to me, who's going to pick this up? I need to at least have a plan in place to handle that accidental kind of exit.
Hmm.
And to do that,
I would argue it's even a good time to start it more intentionally too. I mean,
yeah,
you never, some people do it for their people who have their succession plans in place for a decade.
yeah,
You know.
it's something everybody should have, and it's so much easier to have a plan like that when you can point to an accumulation of 3, 4, 5 years of just really solid financial performance. So after
Yeah.
having reinvested a ton in the team and gotten through the pandemic and dealing with this current downturn, I really want to see 2024 be the year where all of the fundamentals we put in place, like all the seeds that we've planted to make this really thrive, finally germinate and sprout.
But I would imagine even if you're planning financially for a 5% reduction in top line, that when you talk about like growth and success next year, even if you did 9.5, and I understand the mental hurdle and all the rest of it, but you should be expecting more profit off of that 9.5 than probably from the last 10 that
Yes,
you made, right? So
that's right.
actually you'll have more cash, and to your point, you can start to, so in terms of, we talk a lot about like how do you message the team, how do you talk to your leadership team about these things. Yes, the 10 million hurdle is like a nice benchmark, but it's even better to have, more cash at the end of it. And if that's, and
Absolutely.
certainly your structure now lends itself to that, which everybody will see. So even if you don't stretch beyond what your goals are next year and you just hit your goals, team's going to feel really good because there's going to be a lot more left over at the end of the year than they've seen in past years, which of course, you're a magnanimous owner and you're sharing that with them and giving them opportunities to, increase their professional development and their own financial security. Right.
Yep.
And nothing is better than for retention than that. So
Yeah.
cool. We could keep going forever, but I'm going to cut it off there. Todd, this was amazing. Thank you so much.
Oh,
Bart,
thank you.
I apologize to you because I just kind of kept asking questions. Is there anything you wanted
Why you're on it,
to
not
get in
me.
there with Todd? I just know his story really well because we talked.
This is why you ask all the questions. I just produced it.
Yeah, right.
He hates when I do
Cool.
this. Well, Todd,
I do.
thank you for being on the show. Before I ask you the last question, plug away. Where people can
Yeah.
find
Oh
you.
yeah, absolutely.
Plug away.
Thank you for allowing me to plug. We're Four Kitchens. We make websites for universities, nonprofits, and publishers. Check us out at fourkitchens.com. FOUR kitchens plural, like the room in your house.com.
Nice. And I love the new rebrand, by the way.
Me too.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
So our last questions. Where are you currently obsessed with?
What am I currently obsessed with?
Uh-huh.
Oh man. Uh Jeez. I feel like there's a
I
lot.
love this question. I see. This is Jason did not want to ask this questions ever, and I was like, nope, we're asking this particular question.
That's not
'cause I
true.
love
This
it.
question was originated by an
This is a
idea,
good one.
and then you changed it to obsessed. We were doing like favorites.
Yeah,
Anyway,
because that's my question when I go networking, and it's one of my
this guy,
favorite
Sure.
this
things
guy,
to
I
ask.
take credit for everything.
Yeah, yeah.
Um I guess one of the things that is I've been, I don't know, thinking about, reading about a lot, is there's this art group. How do you explain it? So it's called Meow Wolf. They're like a psychedelic, interactive, um, uh, what's the other word I'm looking for? Immersive art experience, and they have locations in several cities. They just recently opened one fairly close to me in Dallas, so it's about a 3-hour drive. We went and visited that on opening weekend a couple of weeks ago. It's just such an incredible experience, and we've just made plans to go see the other location, the last location we have not yet seen of the four that exist. It's called Omega Mart. It's in Las Vegas. My wife and I have plans to go check that out in October. It's been on my bucket list for a while. Um, and I recently interviewed the founder and president of Meow Wolf. His name is Vince on our podcast. Hey, we have a podcast, by the way. It's called The Future of Content. Check it out.
All right, there you go.
Interviewed him, and that was just a really inspiring and interesting conversation to learn about his thoughts about like the frontier of human experience and imagination, and what the human race may be like in a few hundred years. His thesis statement is essentially, we so far have been a species of language, and with the advent of different technologies and things that take over so much of the burden of language and communication, that we are entering a phase where we are about to become creatures of imagination. And so we would have the ability through AR, VR, algorithms, all the things that we kind of get freaked out about. But if you look at that from an artist's perspective, it's the ability to like paint your world, design the world that you want
Mm.
within the world that exists. And that can be a really great thing, and that can be a really terrifying thing. And the world of like Meow Wolf is sort of a physical manifestation of that. And so I'm just really, that's kind
Wow.
of the thing that I've been spending my cycles
I,
learning
yeah,
about
I
and
gotta
reading
say,
about. And
Todd, I think this was the best one yet. No, seriously, I think this was the best one yet. Because
Oh, cool. Thank you.
asking that question is always funny, right? Because everybody's like, "Oh, in the business realm," I'm like, I don't really care. Like,
Right.
give me whatever, right? So this one was the best one yet. Todd, thank you for being on the show.
For sure.
Yeah,
We'll
thank
see
you.
you guys when we see you.
Thanks,
All
everybody.
right. Take care. Thank you.